Hello, everyone. This is Congressman Troy Balderson, and we're back to do our next podcast. This is our fourth podcast, and this one's really exciting, too. We've had very great success with the first couple that we've been doing, and very excited. But today, there's a couple other reasons why we're really excited. Big excitement is I was just recently appointed to the Ag Committee in the Congress, and we're really, really excited about that. And we'll talk a little bit about how that all happened and the process and the procedure, but the importance of that. The state of Ohio is the number one industry, is agricultural, and it was really important for me to get on this committee, and I was very pleased and blessed to be able to have the opportunity to serve on this committee. So we're really excited, and we'll get more detail of how that got going. But one of the first folks that I reached out to is my special guest today, and Adam from the Ohio Farm Bureau. And Adam, thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Congressman, for asking me to be on and to talk with you. And yes, let me say congratulations. We really appreciate your appointment to the House Agriculture Committee. It's an important place for Ohio, right? We have such a large farm industry here in the state and just a lot of fantastic parts to the industry. You know, whether you talk about food processing or production agriculture out in the fields that everybody drives by every single day and often doesn't think too much about, or the restaurant industry, you know, the grocery stores and the big chains that are located here. And we have so many really good facets to the farm and food chain in the state of Ohio. It's great to have somebody like you who knows the industry on that committee. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. For most of you, you may know or you may not know, I do have an ag background. My family operated a corn and soybean and beef operation in Adamsville, Ohio. I'm very proud of Adamsville. I was in 4-H there. I was a Adamsville 4-H mixed farmer was our group, and had great memories from there. Some of the best memories that I have are from our farm and working there and growing up, and just the time you spend with your family, your dad, your grandpa, your uncle, cousins, and we were all in it together, and it was really a good time. And back in those days, we didn't get paddles. If we did something we shouldn't do, our dads would say, "Now you just start building fence from one end of the farm to the other." Sometimes you would rather just say, "Hey, Dad, just give me 3 whacks, so I got this done." But he knew that it was much harder for us to do that for our discipline. But
yeah, there you go. Well, as I was going to say, that's something too that's more and more rare in the U.S. Congress and even in the General Assembly. Right down here in Ohio is individuals who have a farm background. So people who grew up on farms or has been part of the industry. It's more and more rare, which makes it even more valuable, right, for somebody like yourself who has that background to be on that committee, because there's just not. And of course, the committee has a broad spectrum, right, that they have to deal with too. I mean, it is ag, but it's a big, diverse industry. And you get into things like food assistance and other things like that. Good programs, good stuff, and people on there that come onto that committee with that particular interest. But production agriculture being kind of the backbone of that committee, it's something that is rare. And we've been blessed in Ohio to have a couple really good congressmen who have an ag background, which is rare.
That's kind of what we want to talk about today too, Adam, is just, when you hear the ag committee, it's just not about corn and soybeans and beef and dairy and those commodity groups. I mean, there's a lot more to it that people don't understand.
Ohio, of course, as I mentioned, alluded to a little bit ago, you can't drive very far around the state, right, without passing just cornfield, bean field, livestock operation, fruit and vegetables. The industry is so huge in the state. As you mentioned, it's number one industry. It's over $100 billion worth of value in this state, which is enormous. It puts it at the top of the chain for the state of Ohio. It is interesting when you think about an industry that big and broad in the state. Over 70,000 active farmers, 1,000 food processing facilities. Headquarters of some of the largest restaurant chains in the country are right here. When you look at that broad and powerful, industry that it is, how few folks really know a lot about it.
Exactly.
And it is complex is why I think a lot of folks underestimate the complexity of the agriculture industry. They make assumptions, right? That it's cows and plows and coveralls. And there's kind of that old image, right, of the industry. But anymore when we're talking about issues and you see it on the ag committee at the federal level or down here in the state, it immediately gets technical, right? That you jump right into technology and you jump into issues of data and data management and understanding markets and marketing and understanding the weather, understanding environmental laws and issues and property rights and property issues and workers and work service and a whole different series of technological pieces that deal just with your equipment. Just how do I get my equipment fixed? It's very expensive equipment. It's very technical equipment. And all that has changed so dramatically out on the farm, and it's often underestimated. So that's why, again, it brings such good value to have people who know the industry to be part of the discussion about policy setting for food and agriculture. Well,
we just had a ag roundtable this afternoon, and met with several of the commodity groups and some folks from the district talking about some of those issues. I think another one that, has gotten talked about a lot in the district at a winery. And so the ag tourism piece, that's getting that conversation. And Bob Peters and I played a part in that and the state legislature to get that conversation. But that ag tourism has grown. You want to talk a little bit about that tourism piece, Adam?
Agritourism and ag tourism. And folks, it's interesting, how many folks, maybe the first time they hear that term and they don't understand what it is. And it is a big sector in the state of Ohio. And part of that's just because of the nature of our geography, right? We have a number of large cities. But they're spread out, right? And around them is all this agriculture ground. So whether you're talking about Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, or it's Akron or Toledo or Dayton, you get all these different, large or medium-sized cities, but surrounded by ag. So what that has meant is opportunities for a lot of farmers to produce and sell directly into markets. So as much here as in any state, it's a very big opportunity. So whether it's fruits and vegetables or livestock for meat or eggs, you name it, there's a lot of products that can be produced and sold directly to the consumer. And as folks come onto those farms to shop at those farm markets, or pick a pumpkin as we're getting, as we start to head into the fall here, and have some entertainment tied in with it too, maybe the corn maze or something like that, right? Or a hayride. Those are all things that have been on the rise, right, in popularity, and people enjoy doing it, and farmers enjoy the opportunity to provide those, those opportunities for people. And it has been a growing industry in our state. More and more of our members, Farm Bureau members, are hosting and are part of these types of businesses. It's another whole dynamic of agriculture, because here again is another whole way that farmers are relating to a consuming public and finding new ways to do it. And people love it. But it's complex. It's another form of business too that also has to be looked at as a business, and make sure that you're protecting the public and the farmers protecting the property as people come onto that ground. And you've done great work in that area. And those are things that, while it's fun and people forget that when they're out there at the farm doing these things, they forget that there's a lot of risk there to the farmer, right? And just having somebody come onto the ground, and making sure that they're protected so that the consumers can come on and have a good time, and not worry about the risk and liability. There's a lot that goes into that, and you've done fantastic work in that area. By the way, thank you for helping to make sure that farmers can provide that kind of opportunity for families.
Adam, you and I both have a farming background. I mean, tell us a little bit about your background, and I'll share some of my background.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly, born and raised right on our family's farms. We go back to, we could trace our family farming roots in Ohio back to about 1847. If you go down Route 33 here, the other, heading southeast toward the Hocking Hills, and you go past Lancaster, and you go by Sharp Road, and on the right side is Sharp Farms, and that was my great-great-great-great-grandfather's farm.
Incredible.
And it's still owned by the family and farmed by the family. I was over there. They have a farm. They have a agritainment there. They have a farm market there in the fall. So we were over to visit them last fall. But you know how these farm families are. They had 10 or 12 kids each generation, and so they had to kind of move out. There wasn't enough of them, enough room at the original farm. So they started buying other farms. And my grandfather and father bought a number of farms, and then me and my brothers now own and operate those farms, and we've just bought another one here recently, and to add into our farming business. So there's 4 brothers, but 3 of us farm together. The 4th brother is a minister. Which is a good thing if you're in farming. It's good to have the 4th brother.
Good to have a minister in the family.
It's a good place for him to be helping us in other ways. But 3 of us farm together. We have We have some livestock, but principally corn and beans. We did have a dairy, but the dairy market's rough. And we actually just transitioned out of the dairy business. We had a certified organic dairy, and we had a dairy in our family for 70 years. And we just transitioned it and turned it into a hay business, which the demand has been huge, and the hay markets have been, people need a lot of hay. So we turned the dairy into a hay business, and we've of course continued doing the row crops. So keeps us busy.
And you bring up one of the biggest chores that no one liked to do, kind of even worse than building fence, and that's baling hay.
Do a little hay baling.
Yeah. And you can't take your shirt off. It's 100 degrees outside because you're itching so bad, but you do it anyways. And I'll never forget a story that I had one time when I was younger, and Don Melhorn, I'll never forget this. He worked for a company called Heston, and they had the very first hay stacker. So instead of baling the hay,
absolutely,
this was before
technology.
Technology at its best. This was before the round bales even came out. But this stacker would go in there, and I'll never forget. I was standing there in the driveway and thinking, "All right, this is it. No more baling hay." And my dad must have read my mind or heard or saw me. He just says, "Don't think we're not baling hay anymore either, just because you see that stacker come in here yet." So we're still going to bale hay.
That's right.
But anyways, obviously it's evolved even more, but they're still baling hay, and kids get out there and do it. And it's and I think that's, what we miss a lot anymore. It's just the discipline and the structure, and whether it's 4-H or being on that farm. And I learned so much when I was on that farm and had so much fun. And you fuss and you wrestle around and argue a little bit, but I just, some of my best memories come from the farm. And our farm was around for over 100 years, and my grandfather came across from West Virginia and found it. But it definitely was fun. One of the big things, even before I was on the committee, Adam, the American Farm Bureau and Ohio Farm Bureau and a lot of the commodity groups, we were really pushing this USMCA. It was the biggest single piece of legislation that the agricultural community throughout this country wanted to get passed. And the USMCA is United States-Mexico-Canadian Agreement. Can you just kind of get into the details of the importance of that and what that meant to finally get done?
Yeah. The predecessor, of course, NAFTA. And NAFTA, signed back in the 90s, has been a terrific trade agreement for Ohio agriculture and for American agriculture. We've had about a $40 billion, that's with a B, $40 billion increase in product that has moved into Canada and Mexico under NAFTA. So for agriculture, it was good. Wasn't perfect, right? There were other issues we still had with it, which now have been addressed under USMCA for the most part, really. But so it was always good for ag. And that was part of when the renegotiations began. It was, we wanted to make sure, let's preserve the strength in it and try to fix even some more of the problems. And that's what was able to be accomplished. So a very good story for USMCA. Of course, it went effective just here in July. So, so we're now seeing it really in full force, which is good to see. What a lot of folks don't realize is, the Canada and Mexico are our two largest agriculture markets. For not just Ohio, but for Ohio exports, yes, but also for the country. So nationally, we move a lot of product all over the world, but Canada and Mexico are our two biggest purchasers. China's right there too, but those are our two biggest markets. And and a lot of Ohio products, go right up across the lake, if you will, really around the lake usually, but they go right up north, and we appreciate those markets and opening up even more opportunities for that. And we've enjoyed having relationships with our Canadian friends right across the border in Ontario, and in fact, we talk to the grower groups up there quite often, and they appreciate being part of this block and being part of and interacting with American agriculture. So it is an important part of our industry. It's an important friendship to have. The Mexican market has grown and grown as well. So if you look south of the border, corn and pork and beef, and there's a big market for Ohio products. So it is an important thing. We really appreciate your work on getting USMCA done and now implemented.
Yes.
So it means a lot to our state, but it means a lot to American agriculture. So thank you for your work there.
No, it was an honor, and that was something that everyone was working really hard on trying to get through. And you and I were sitting here talking a few minutes before we got started today and talked about China just made its first big purchase a couple weeks ago. So we're really excited about that.
When we talk about trade with China, most people think, well, we're just buying stuff from China. We must just be buying everything from China, right? But one sector that the trade imbalance goes the other way is agriculture. We sell them a lot more food than we buy from them. We are at a big net gain there on food sale to China. And we got to keep that, right? That's something we produce and we sell to China in bulk, right? In commodity. And that's fantastic. It's something we've got to maintain. And the Phase 1 agreement not only allows that to move forward, but grow. And that's what's really important about it is they're a huge market. They buy a lot. And now this is going to allow them to buy even more. And you had a disruption with Phase 1, of course, because of COVID, and of course, especially where it originated, right, in China. So that really did disrupt their markets on being able to purchase. But we've just seen some enormous purchases by them here lately, just in the last couple of weeks, and that's starting to send the Phase 1, back into the right direction.
It is. It's encouraging, and people have come up to me and asked me, and from being out and about in the district, to say, "Hey, is that China deal working? I mean, is that Phase 1 starting to happen?" And I said, "Yes," and as you just brought up, that COVID coming in and just some things got delayed a good bit. But yes, it is moving and moving forward quickly. So as we bring up COVID and the hurdles, dealing with this pandemic, let's talk about the first CARES package, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. It was $3 billion for dairy, produce, and meat. Can you share with us a little bit what the importance of that was and what it does mean?
It's interesting. I've had a lot of conversations, with a lot of people who traditionally just haven't seemed, they're not engaged in the food and ag markets, in our system, and don't really know a lot about it. And a lot of people have been fascinated because they said, well, gosh, everybody kept eating, right? Everybody kept, focusing even more on going to the grocery store and maybe getting takeout and doing all these things. So a lot of focus, kind of came in on food back in the spring, right, when COVID began. So it was hard for people then to kind of wrap their head around there was an impact on ag. How could that possibly be? Well, it was, again, it's a complex system. And that's right. There was big disruption in the meat processing side of things, in particular, where you had, unfortunately, right, you had some workers who impacted with COVID, and you had some meat facilities that had to shut down and or lengthen out their production lines much more than normal. So those were real challenges for the market. It really created disruption, and then just moving product from where it traditionally had been going into different markets in different ways to provide it, and then these random rushes, on grocery stores for certain products that suddenly get wiped out, and they're like, well, should we ration those or not? But it's not because there's necessarily a shortage. There's not a shortage. The production never stopped back on the farm, and it never stopped through the system. The system had to adjust, so you had some shortages at different times, but never a shortage. Our National Farm Bureau president, Zippy Duvall, farmer in Georgia, and he has been saying this a lot lately, but he says, he said, sometimes when you go to the grocery store, if the product you wanted there during the height of COVID wasn't there, that can be scary. But if there's food not being produced on the farm, now that's terrifying. And that never stopped, that never stopped. Farmers plowed right through it, if you will, pun intended. To some degree, farmers are a little socially distanced anyway, because we're out on tractors in the fields and the farms and the barns and doing work. Others are not, right, when they're dealing with, with agritainment and places where they're really interacting with people. But a lot of them, didn't really see disruption on the farm, right? Production went on. We call it food security. And in this country, we're blessed with it. And we often take it for granted because we've become so used to it. So having the spotlight on some wrinkles there when, oh gosh, the food market got a little disrupted. Frankly, I think it was good for Americans to see that there's a system there that has to work. We have to preserve it. We have to keep food security because we produce enough food for our country, and we produce so much. We sell a lot of it around the world. A lot of people depend on us as the breadbasket of the world. And I hope we can keep doing that. So that was very good work done by Congress to help with CARES. Very appreciated, and farmers really appreciate it. Congress acting to provide some assistance in these places because of this just mass disruption in our ag markets and the bottom falling out of some of these markets was critical. So again, I come back to these roles when on the Agriculture Committee and the work you did here in the Ohio legislature on agriculture issues is so critical. And I think and hope, right, a little spotlight on that through COVID really shows the need and the importance for us to support this industry, preserve it, keep it, and have food security in this country, hopefully, right, for generations to come.
As we've gone through this pandemic, we've learned a lot of things, and we've learned how to do business differently. We've adapted. Some things have advanced much quicker than what we would have anticipated for the good. And, I've shared with, a couple of times on podcasts I've done in the past of, the telehealth and the telemedicine and what that's meant. And we've carried some really good pieces of legislation, Cindy Axie and I, and Cindy is actually out of Iowa.
Yes.
But, one of those things that is kind of getting the conversation again now is rural broadband.
Yes.
And the gaps are there. And even when I go to Mark Van Buren or any of these ag tourism facilities, you have orchard facilities throughout this great state and the district. And, the one thing they just say to me and Troy, we really need rural broadband. And sometimes it gets a little bit frustrating. We've been talking about it, and we're trying to fight to get ahead of some of this stuff. And we're hearing the stories. I mean, obviously with the education piece, kids doing their classes via home, but not having the ability to get internet, and it's real. And I think that it has come more up front in this issue of the challenges of that. Do you want to talk a little bit about the ag rural broadband piece of it?
I appreciate you bringing up that issue and your attention to it, because it has been a real interesting little spotlight there too, right? That we've talked about it as being important for quite a while, but again, it didn't really, I don't think you had a broader audience kind of focus in on it until now. And now you see everybody's trying to work from home and do things. And farmers say, well, hey, look, we've always been working from home from our farms, and we've been struggling, right, with broadband access. Too many folks think, well, gosh, if I live in any of these urban centers, for the most part, I got pretty good access, to broadband service and to great internet service. They don't think about, you don't go very far outside of a city like Columbus, and suddenly it's not there. I live 45 minutes. Our farm is 45 minutes from downtown Columbus, and the entire center of our dairy farm, which now is our hay business, that farm, we don't even have cell phone service there. Yeah. We have to go over on the next hill to get cell phone service, let alone broadband service. Even at our main farm, we do not have broadband service. It's not there. And we're 45 minutes from downtown Columbus, so you don't even have to go all the way down, into southeastern Ohio someplace before you go, oh yeah, well, I understand maybe back there they don't have broadband. Well, guess what? It's just right outside of Canal Winchester. We don't have broadband. It's not far away. So that's the part that I think a lot of Ohioans also don't understand, that we do have the big holes in our state when it comes to the infrastructure on that kind of service. And that's something that opens up even more opportunities for rural Ohio to contribute to the economy of the state, jobs, et cetera, is through broadband, education, healthcare, like you talked about, all kinds of great things. So thanks for your work on that.
No, it's huge. And Bill Johnson, we passed some legislation in Congress before the first year on remapping, because, people think that broadband is just not out in the country. Well, there's places close by in this district. And as you said, you're just right down the road at Canal Winchester that don't have access to internet. And it's important. It's vital. And, even the state legislature is working here. Rick Carfagna has a bill out there now for $20 million. And, I'm working with him, and we're working a lot with the energy co-ops. I mean, you're very familiar with energy co-ops and what they mean. And, they were able to put electricity in our farms out in the country through the rural community. So what better organization to start, working on the broadband piece? So I know several of the organizations here are doing some studies to see how much financially, because it's not going to be cheap. I mean, it's some of the organizations I talk to, it's $80 to $90 million. It's a huge investment, but we're going to continue working on that and make sure that we can get this broadband piece and search where we need to go to get that taken care of.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's just like rural phone service, right? I grew up.
Everybody had the party line, right?
Everybody had the party line. Yeah, I was going to say at our my grandparents' house at their farm, it was the party line. We had to pick up and ask the neighbor lady if, hey, can we use the phone in about 10 minutes? And this was, it was not even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and it was this party line still. And so broadband's like that. It's Farm Bureau invested with rural electric co-ops back, many years ago, right, decades ago now, to help put in the first rural electric co-ops and bring electric out to rural Ohio. Then phone service, and getting those party lines in there, getting phone service in there. Now we are here, right? Broadband's the next thing. There's no reason not to do the same thing.
It's funny, and you bring a smile to my face. I mean, it was funny. You get on there and say, hey, we need to use the phone. Can we use the phone when you're done?
Use the phone when you're done?
Yes. Yeah. And, well, how do you know when it's done? Well, we'll be off here in about 15 minutes, and you checked it again in 15 minutes. And if you picked up and they were still on, they would say, oh, we're sorry. We'll get off here right now. But and you brought up the self-service piece too. I mean, that's a big deal. And I mean, this machinery and what these farmers are operating have GPS systems in them, and just being able to pick that up and working. I mean, when you and I farmed when we were kids, it's completely different. I mean, it's 4 times what it was then. That's right. And, the in-depth and, some of the things that we talked about at the roundtable I just did, the cost of equipment, the cost of, of ammonia. I mean, things that you don't think of back in 1980 that, was a couple bucks. And now it's quadrupled or tripled. And that's a big deal for what these farmers are dealing with on the investment side of it.
That's right. And and I'm glad you raised that side of it. It's interesting. People say, oh gosh, self-driving cars, that'll be so fantastic. And Teslas, I say, hey, we've had self-driving tractors for a decade.
Yep.
So catch up, people.
Yeah, catch up. I mean, that's one thing we're ahead of them.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun, because I tell people, well, when your tractor emails you to tell you it's sick, it's got a problem and it needs to be fixed. That's technology, right? And when it can move and place a seed right within a quarter of an inch and map it and put perfect placement out there of seeds, so you can get the most and maximum amount into the acres that you have, so that you're being efficient, right, with the use of land and making sure that the right nutrients are there, not too much, right, not too little. Those kind of accuracies that technology has allowed the agriculture community to move into has been phenomenal for the consumer, for the world, for all those countries that can't feed themselves, and depend on the United States to produce food and to sell to them. It's a big deal. And as we move into that space, what's next, right? And we talk about, that's the part that excites me, despite all the troubles and things you deal with. The constant discussion about what's next, right? How do we market better? How do we move things to the consumer that they want, right? The consumer's demand in the food chain. When you're talking about animal care, or you're talking about agriculture and the environment, when you're talking about farming in a way that's designing, and part of that is what food do we want to produce today? Is there a way to make it and even more efficiently and design it to the way that the consumer really does want in nutritional value or whatnot, or vitamins or different things. Fascinating stuff going on in the ag field right now, and it's exciting to be part of it. I'm glad you're representing Ohio State, and you got this great land grant that's on you're right there on the front end of so many of those advances in this industry, and it's just right here in our backyard. And you can't beat being part of that and understanding the excitement of that around this industry as we move forward here into what will be a better year next year, right?
It will definitely be a better next year. And again, with Adam Sharp here with us today, president of Ohio Farm Bureau, talking about ag and agriculture and the importance that it is to Ohio, but also talking about myself being appointed to the Ag Committee. Yeah. People have a misunderstanding of what Ag Committee is, and people in the district say, what do you care about the Ag Committee, Troy? There's only 4,000 farmers in this district, and I try to explain to them that this is a whole lot more than just farmers. I mean, the Ag Committee is just not farmers. It's your food. It's where you go every time you go get something for dinner. It's food. And if you would just kind of talk about the labeling. I mean, there's kind of talk about some of those other things that no one really thinks about when we say the Agricultural Committee.
Three times a day, right? For some of us, more often than that.
It might be 6.
We care a lot about food, and that's right. When you think about the whole train of jobs, right, that's moving down the track in agriculture, it starts with the farmer. But if you go back even further than that, right, it's all the individuals who are employed in jobs that are supplying the farmers with their equipment, with their seed, with feed for their animals and different things like that. So which also can be farmers, right? They're part of that, on the front side of even that. And then as the food moves through the chain, right, so that it gets produced, then it moves truck drivers, people that are involved in transportation and trains. Then it moves over into food processing, right? And like I mentioned, we have 1,000 food processors in the state of Ohio. You got them in your district. Then you get into, in meat processors, same thing, right? And then you jump over to the grocery stores and the restaurants and the schools and all these different places where the industry impacts. So it may only be 4,000 producers in the district, which is quite a few, by the way, of course. But you think about all those jobs connected through all of that is enormous, let alone just the value of being able to, not worry about hopefully where your next meal is going to come from. And by the way, if you do worry about where your next meal is coming from, well, guess what? Agriculture is part of that too, and food assistance, right? Whether it's through the school program you just mentioned or through other SNAP program, other things too of food assistance. So it's a big deal. for any person, any voter, right, any consumer. They should know about where their food comes from, and they should feel secure in it. I mentioned labels. I mentioned this, just the complexity, right, of the ag industry. And we talk about putting labels in food, and people in the grocery store, from different people, you hear things about labels. Well, if you think about farming, here's a few of the labels and descriptions that are out there. There's traditional farming, there's conventional farming, there's large farms, there's small farms, there's part-time farms, there's full-time farms, there's hobby farms, there's farmers, there's rural, there's urban, there's suburban farmers, there's organic, there's non-organic, there's certified organic transitional farmers, there's grass-fed, there's grass-raised, there's grass-based, there's access to grass, there's chemical-free, pesticides, pesticide-free, dirt-free, land-free, there's all natural, sort of natural, not natural at all, lab-grown, lab-raised, GMO, GMO-free, non-GMO, may contain GMO, biotechnology, biodynamic, vertical farming, horizontal farming, CAFOs, factory farms, CAFEs, mega farms, nano farms, fast food, slow food, plant forward, that means no meat, clean label, which means you're supposed to be able to easily understand the label. There's anxiety-free food, think calm, soothing foods that may contain CBD like jelly beans, right? Okay, upcycled food, which are products that are reused food waste. There's rescued food, which is spent grain, for example. There's regenerative, which is improving the land when you're farming, which, by the way, most farmers like to try to do that.
Absolutely.
Well, there's fat-free, gluten-free, sugar-free, cholesterol-free. So when you think about labels in agriculture, right, there's just a smitten of them. And it's a complex thing for the consumer, right, to kind of navigate all of those terms and understand what's happening. Well, we're here to just tell you, look, it's food, okay, and we're producing it in our backyards right here in Ohio, right, and it's healthy, it's safe, and by the way, you probably want to make sure we keep doing it here because it provides stability, it provides jobs, and it provides hopefully a really good meal at the end of the day.
Amen. That's the main part, is that it provides jobs and it provides a great meal at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Adam, I have never heard it described that way. That truly was fantastic, and
thank you.
I'm going to memorize that.
I'll get you my list,
and I'm going to take you up on that list. It's really been great having you here, Adam. And again, for those that have just kind of jumped in or didn't know, but I'm really honored to have with me today a friend, but also he's just a great resource for me and my staff. But Adam Sharp, who is president of the Ohio Farm Bureau. Adam and I knew each other before he even became president. He had big shoes to fill, and he's done a fantastic job with what he's doing, and look forward to working with you and as we move forward. And we got a farm bill coming up here in 2021.
That's right.
People think that, the one farm bill was just done, but we have another one that'll be ready to come back up again, and we'll be dealing with that, and look forward to working with you on that, and always a pleasure to sit down with you, and thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate being your guest on the podcast and talking a lot about what we obviously care a lot about at the Farm Bureau, and appreciate all the members out there across the organization. I'll make one final announcement. We really appreciate, not public yet, but we'll make it public on here, that we recognize you as a friend of Farm Bureau. So that's Farm Bureau's endorsement as we move into this next election cycle. It's a big deal for us, and you've well deserved and well earned it. So,
wow.
So congratulations, and we appreciate being able to call you a friend of Ohio agriculture.
Thank you. I'm honored, and I've had that through my whole legislature career. So it is truly, I'm honored, and I'm blessed to be able to do that, and it's proud for me to carry that. So thank you.
Excellent. Now, you're welcome, and thank you.